Good afternoon, Your Worship and other City Councillors. My name is Megan Waldie, and I am a resident of Renfrew. I was originally just going to speak at the North Hill Local Area Plan agenda item. However, having listened to the hearing on the guidebook for the last 2 days, I felt I had a duty to speak up. For the record, I am in support of the general concept of an integrated guidebook for the city and do see the importance and amazing potential for growth and redevelopment of Calgary that the guidebook brings. However, I have been hearing from many people over the last 2 days of people in support of the guidebook use the argument that it is okay to approve the guidebook as it is today without further community engagement because surely that level of collaboration will happen at the local area plan stage. And I'm here to say that simply has not been true for the North Hill Local Area Plan. It essentially has already been finalized and is up for approval here today, as you heard. And as we heard from the previous speaker from Renfrew yesterday, 96% of the residents that she polled, which was a few hundred, are opposed to critical portions of the plan. And even further, many of the residents she talked to haven't even heard of the local area plan, let alone given input or feedback. It is the program pilot, in my opinion, that has already failed because it has not merely been sufficient in completing meaningful engagement necessary to allow for the success for our communities to thrive. Yes, we have heard from a select few who are on community associations and selected as part of the committees, but what about all the average citizens who are saying they were not consulted, who had never even heard about it? I consider myself well engaged in community affairs. I've attended some community association meetings. I follow the community association and the city on social media. I read all our newsletters. I walk the neighborhood. I even attended several sessions on the Midfield Park redevelopment, but I've never heard of the North Hill Local Area Plan or any kind of collaborative meetings or workshops. The only reason I found out about it was a flyer posted on a mailbox, not by the city or committee members, but a private citizen. Regardless of why or how or who is responsible for this disconnect, the fact is that the community consultation has not been sufficient, and so we need to hold off on passing this guidebook and specifically the North Hill Local Area Plan until we find a process for community engagement that is effective. Just as Mr. Robertson described last night, it's probably 10 o'clock p.m., for all the sake of the other local area plans, we need to have a process that works. I would also like to rebut a point made by a supporter of the guidebook yesterday, which was that, I quote, "No one is dropping 6-story buildings into the middle of single-story homes and residential roads," unquote. That is precisely what is being proposed in Renfrew. A quiet residential road is currently lined with single-story bungalows and proposed with 6-story buildings on its south side, completely shading a toddler playground, a community ice rink, a baseball diamond, and more on the north side of the street. Because while I did hear those very articulate and thoughtful presenters last night, my objection today is not based on bigotry or power or class. I'm trying to protect a playground, an ice rink, and other community assets for all of the future increased population density that I welcome to Renfrew, so that they and their children can still enjoy what makes this community great. Please, Your Worship, councillors, we need to take pause here, take a step back, and yes, celebrate how far we have come with this plan, this guidebook. It is an incredible undertaking, but we still have a ways to go before we're at the finish line. Because if the scenario I described in Renfrew was overlooked in our local area plan, how many other small intricacies have been and will be overlooked in other area plans without meaningful community involvement to help with these things? Sorry, I'm really passionate about this.
You're doing great. Keep going.
Please send this guidebook back to the council and to communities before we enter this into the law. If this does pass today without further amendments or further engagement, please make a commitment to take the overwhelming feedback you've received in this hearing over the last 2 days regarding the community engagement that is necessary when considering local area plans, so we can back up all of the good intentions that you say this guidebook represents. Thank you for your commitment to making our city the greatest it can be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for spending 3 days with us now. Mr. Bergeron, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastien Bergeron, and I'm here speaking in favor of the Guidebook. I chose to buy my first house last year in Mount Pleasant, a community that's included under the North Hill Communities Local Area Plan. I chose to invest in that neighborhood because this LAP hopefully comes close to officially coming into force. Consideration of this LAP and the Guidebook was important for me because these plans will encourage growth, giving me the opportunity to live within walking or biking distance to even more great small businesses. I think Calgary needs more areas of the city where people can walk or bike to a bakery, cafe, pub, flower shop, whatever. But those small businesses need a steady clientele to support them. The increased density allowed in the Guidebook will help make this happen. Also, I oppose segregating neighborhoods by residential building type. A greater variety of housing stock leads to a greater variety of people sharing a community, which I believe makes people more open-minded and tolerant. Diversity is, of course, our strength. In addition, I think that offering a larger variety of homes at different price ranges plays a part in making the city more affordable. The increased density will also help slow down sprawl and reverse the population loss seen by so many established neighborhoods. What I'm describing is, of course, a mixed-use neighborhood. The public hearing so far has me asking, what is so scary about some great local shops surrounded by a variety of low-density housing, such as single detached homes, duplexes, townhouses, etc.? These types of communities provide spaces for people to meet, mingle, or just people watch, which helps to combat feelings of social isolation. In addition, increasing the amount of mixed neighborhoods will help in attracting and retaining young people, the lifeblood of innovation and of a healthy economy. The benefits of passing the Guidebook are clear. It'll tackle big problems such as costly sprawl, climate change, the dropping population of established neighborhoods, and car dependency. It will allow Calgary to grow into a city made for the future. This is why, in my opinion, approving the Guidebook as is today is what's best for the city. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergeron. Ms. Fisher, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Nenshi, City Council, and Administration. My name is Kim Fisher, and I truly appreciate the chance to speak alongside other Calgarians at this public hearing process. On trend with others, my ties to Calgary go back many years. Both my father and my grandfather were born here. And as others have stated, this does not or should not matter. So bear with me as I take you on a bit of Fisher family history, but I promise I'll tie back to the Guidebook. My grandpa was born in 1925 and passed away in 2017. In his 92 years in Calgary, he spent his formative childhood days exploring Rideau and Roxborough, raiding Crummy Johnson's yard for carrots, and couriering eggs packed in sawdust up to the fancy folk in Mount Royal on his bike. He landed a position working for CP in the Ailth Rail Yard and settled in Northeast Calgary with my grandma, a nurse at the Holy Cross Hospital, and raised 4 kids. Over his life, he saw change. The options for getting around the city evolved. Dirt roads got paved, bus routes grew, the C train improved connectivity, while large freeways intersected the landscape, creating new physical boundaries in the built environment. In parallel, the population of Calgary grew too, welcoming new Calgarians to the city. My grandpa marveled at the change in his childhood communities, was in awe when his family took him across the Peace Bridge for the first time, and was able to celebrate the success of his grandkids as they finished school and started to gain employment. Now, as one of those grandkids who has a family of her own, I want to raise my kid in a city that is known for being a welcoming place for everyone. The Guidebook helps to continue the conversation to take the objectives outlined in the Municipal Development Plan and bring it to our communities for the local area planning process. As others have stated before me, I'm supportive of climate-resilient, equitable, affordable, and anti-racist communities where folks can live regardless of age or stage in life, where they can access community amenities like grocery stores, places of worship, schools, and outdoor spaces, and get there using safe and connected transportation options, whether it be walking, cycling, taking transit, or driving. Most importantly, what I've been able to glean, both from this public hearing process and in light of recent racist events in our city, great communities are more than houses. They need to be places where people feel safe and are welcome, living their day-to-day lives. This means racialized Calgarians, both those born and raised here and folks who are new to the city who have to deal with microaggressions on the daily. People who have called this place home long before it was Calgary, as well as those new to Canada. People living rough, young people, kids and youth who may not be represented in the public hearing process over the past few days, and people who don't have the luxury of disposable time to be here. To quote Maitra Jalali from a Rewire article from last summer, cities need to take a racial equity lens to all urban planning, land use and engagement decisions going forward to empower communities of color who have been disproportionately affected by racist urban planning. The Guidebook starts to address this by unpacking planning terminology using plain language as an example. I trust the work administration is doing to create more inclusive and accessible processes. What I can't support, and what I know my grandpa wouldn't stand for, is the misinformation that has been perpetuated throughout this process. I listened to 2 councillors speak on the radio about the Guidebook last week. One gave out a third-party website about the Guidebook instead of directing folks to the City of Calgary website. I'm disappointed. It's disingenuous and it's, quite frankly, unethical behavior from an elected official. This distracting and divisive political approach continues to drive a wedge between Calgarians. What I do support, though, is the vision forward. I participated online in the North Hill Community's local area planning process, and I support the Mount Pleasant Community Association's position on both the Guidebook and the North Hill Community's local area plan. I'm so happy with what I'm seeing on the ground, especially at Balmoral Circus. Our community already feels more friendly with the park space. So I implore City Council and your worship, Mayor Nenshi, to support the Guidebook for Great Communities and to advance the conversation to keep Calgary on the path forward. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fisher, and thank you for sharing your family story with us as well. Let's go to Mr. Yo. Are you there, sir?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just going to put in some headphones.
Alrighty.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound great. The floor is yours.
Thanks to my previous speaker. I think that was a great presentation as well as a good connection to mine as well. My name is Caleb. I'm a resident of Calgary and Calgary's East Side. I support the Guidebook in its current form and strongly oppose the addition of exclusionary zoning for exclusive neighborhoods in Calgary. As a prelude to my comments, I'm grateful for the interventions made last evening that critique the power dynamics that are at play in this discussion, the clear imbalances in the class and race demographics when it comes to whose voice is being heard and who has the time and luxury to take away from work to contribute to this land use discussion. I'd like to comment on the extremely concerning rhetoric I've heard in this discussion by neighborhood residents that have used the Guidebook as an opportunity to tell council about how oppressed they feel by semi-dense neighborhoods, as well as the fact that Calgary needs to support the Guidebook not for density purposes, but as the last speaker mentioned, if it wants to become a more anti-racist, equitable, and sustainable city for all of its inhabitants. Comments made during this hearing and their racist and classist undertones are very concerning for me as a young Black man living in the city, especially in the context of increasing visibility of outward white supremacist symbols of hate in the public realm, including Confederate flags at cemeteries, thin blue lines on the Calgary Police Service garments, tiki torches at anti-mask rallies, and the vicious attack of this visibly Muslim woman at one of our most beloved public green spaces. All of the aforementioned incidents occurred in the public realm, which is what we are speaking about when we talk about the Guidebook and equitable and sustainable city building and placemaking. The kinds of comments being made by neighborhood residents of this city advance an indirect form of racism through the use of coded, not in my neighborhood language, which I will expand upon more. But just merely having these sentiments advanced indirectly in discussion warns to me that there's a connection between the increasingly visible symbols of white supremacy in our public realm, as well as the rejection of the Guidebook by some of Calgary's wealthiest neighborhoods, by some of Calgary's wealthiest and whitest neighborhoods. In the 1920s, city officials in Calgary codified restrictive covenants to prevent Black residents from purchasing homes outside of the boundaries of the railway yards, which is currently the Victoria Park area. Council passed these restrictive covenants because white residents petitioned to keep Black families out of the neighborhood. You can find this info in the Racial Segregation of Black People in Canada. It's an article by the Canadian Encyclopedia. Unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, the discussion on the guidebook carries the same sentiment forward from a century ago, but just in different coded language, like I previously mentioned. Frequently, we heard from residents from Elbow Park about calls to protect neighborhood character. We heard the typical and accompanying call for more consultation. And to finish the Not in My Neighborhood triple threat, we heard cries about tree canopies and heritage losses. Many of us recognize the toxic calls for neighborhood character and more consultation as truthfully advocating for the exclusion of different kinds of people, not different kinds of housing. Which people exactly? Black, racialized, and indigenous communities and vulnerable communities who require alternative modes of housing, such as transitional housing, used to bridge the gap from homelessness to permanent housing. Call for heritage preservation is mythical and ironic by itself without considering its coded meanings, because so many of the century homes zoned as R1 in these areas where we're hearing these complaints are being torn down and rebuilt as shiny new mansions the size of a triplex or a fourplex. So it seems to be clear that if some or many of these century homes in these neighborhoods are being torn down, the character that these neighborhood residents are trying to conserve actually has nothing to do with their homes. Both the increasingly visible white supremacist symbols of hate, like I mentioned in Calgary, and the indirect racism and classism advanced in the coded sentiments of Elbow Park and other residents tells Calgary's non-white communities that you are not welcome here, you are not safe here, and you most certainly should not live here. Council has a choice today to decide who this public space and the public realm belong to in Calgary. Council needs to interrogate whether the guidebook has any value at all if it fails to pass and protect the public interest, because there has been a deliberate attempt to reduce and limit this conversation to voices of single-family homeowners living in Elbow Park and adjacent communities because they fear any household arrangement other than one that was born a century ago out of anti-Black and indigenous racism, naked prejudice against renters, and the obsession with the nuclear family structure living in the single-family home. Outside my critiques of the blatant showing of spatial and colonial entitlement in this council discussion, I just want to quickly add that relying solely on the market to produce affordable housing in this guidebook will not work and runs the risk of gentrifying semi-affordable working-class neighborhoods in East Calgary. There must be a plan to implement inclusionary zoning that mandates affordable housing in all housing projects carried out by developers, and this should be met by a plan from council to increase the City of Calgary's affordable housing stock and diversify their housing tenures to include group and co-op housing to make sure there isn't an over-reliance on the private sector to create affordable housing, which they surely do not want to do.
Mr. Yo, you're just at time, so I'll ask you to wrap up in a sentence or two.
I'll close by adding that there should be no amendments for exclusionary zoning requirements if Calgary is committed to becoming an anti-racist city. Exclusionary zoning requirements for Calgary's richest and whitest communities serves only to appease the insatiable appetite for white comfort that is not a sustainable basis for urban design, placemaking, or sustainability in a city as diverse as Calgary. If the exclusionary zoning amendment is passed, Council is sending a clear message to all Calgarians that there's no one we protect more than white single-family homeowners. Binks.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Yo, and thank you for that very interesting perspective on what we've been talking about. Let's go to Mr. Kowel. David Kowel, are you there?
I am here.
The floor is yours, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, my name is David Kowel. I'm a student and a resident of Millrise. I'm in support of the Guidebook for Great Communities. As you know, Millrise is a suburb surrounded by more suburbs. I can walk in any direction for 25 to 30 minutes, and I'll find myself surrounded by single-family homes and pretty much past only single-family homes. The only thing in my community for the most part is single-family homes. There's really nowhere to go or nothing to do. There's no places to walk to, and I just really can't walk anywhere. I live in the fourth largest city in Canada, but it feels like I live in the middle of nowhere. I'm a slave to my car. If I want to go somewhere, if I want to go to the grocery store, if I want to go to the dentist, if I want to get a bite to eat, I have to go in my car. It's too far to walk. To check my oil, I have to fill up on gas, I have to pay for insurance. I have to make sure I have access to a car. I have to pay for a car. And I speak from a place of privilege. I'm able to afford and have ready access to a car. There are people in Calgary who can either not drive or afford a car. There are Calgarians who live in car-dependent suburbs who do not have ready access to a car. I want to be able to walk places badly. How badly do people who don't have access to a car want to be able to walk places? I ask the people in the opposition of this document, the opposition of the guidebook, to think, what would you do if tomorrow you couldn't drive? Let's say you total your car gets stolen, or you injure your arms and you can't steer. Would you be happy in your car-dependent suburb, isolated in an ocean of single-family homes? Would you be happy in your purgatory of cul-de-sacs, of driveways, of narrow sidewalks, of empty lawns? Would you be happy to wait 30 minutes just for the bus to get to your stop, just so you can get a bottle of juice? Would you still oppose that corner store? Would you oppose that multi-unit dwelling with a first-floor retail? Would you oppose a diverse community? Do you still oppose the guidebook? And I want you to extend this line of thinking to the rest of Calgary, to the Calgarians who cannot afford to drive, to the Calgarians who don't have access to the same recreation, essential services, and job opportunities because their financial circumstance dictates they can't own a vehicle. We've created a city where basic mobility is pay to win, pay to play. We must make our communities walkable, if not for public health, if not for sustainability, if not for accessibility, then for equity. Everyone deserves to go places. Walkability should not be a luxury for the people who can afford to live in communities like Marterloop or the Beltline. Walkability should be an element of community that is universal to all of Calgary. And this is why I support the Guidebook for Great Communities, because the Guidebook streamlines the planning process for our communities to become diverse, dense, vibrant, and most importantly, walkable. So I ask the Council follow through with the years of engagement, follow through with the hard work of administration, and approve this guidebook and vote it into bylaw. I thank you for your patience throughout this process, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just end with, we just want to walk places. We want walkable communities. Please approve this guidebook. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kowel. Again, very interesting perspective. That brings us to the end of this panel, and Councillor Farrell, has a question for the panel. Go ahead, Councillor Farrell.
Thank you to the panel. Excellent presentations. Mr. Yeo, would you be able to send your presentation to all of Council? That was brilliant, and I would love the ability to read it again. Thank you.
Yeah, I could definitely do that. No worries.
Thank you. I'm doing a bit of a word cloud of the common words that I'm hearing from people, and it's interesting. Thank you again.
Great. Thanks very much. Councillor Sutherland, please.
Thank you. I'm not sure of the speaker. It might have been Mr. Yule, so I don't want to accuse anybody. But maybe I heard wrong, but in part of the presentation it was referred to white people that own houses? Or did I mishear that?
I think if you're referencing like what I closed with, I said that. Sorry, I'm just gonna find it. Oh, I said if the exclusionary zoning amendment is passed, council is sending a clear message to all Calgarians that no one we protect more than white single-family homeowners, and this is of course in reference to, like I said, the kinds of comments or remarks that we heard from Alberta Park residents.
I'm sorry, Mr. Yeo, we're just getting a lot of feedback. It's a little bit hard to hear you. So everyone else, please mute your phone. And if you could go back, please, Mr. Yeo.
Yeah, is it okay now?
Yeah, it's much better. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I was saying, it was just in my closing that I said passing an exclusionary zoning amendment would send a message that there is no one we protect more in Calgary than white single-family homeowners, and this is just data that we get from the census neighborhoods of Alberta Park as well as the adjacent neighborhoods who have a 6% visible minority compared to the city average of a 36% visible minority.
Thanks. I could hear that, but there is still a little bit of feedback, so I'll ask everyone, please, again, to make sure you're muted. Councillor Sutherland?
really don't have a comment. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Dumont?
Yes, thank you. I've got a quick question for Miss Megan Waldie, if I could. Are you still there, Megan?
Yes.
Hi. Can you give me a little bit more explanation as to when you actually found out about this process and how you ended up finding out about it?
Yeah, so it was about probably beginning of February. I was on a walk with my dog, and I saw a flyer posted on one of the mailboxes that said something to the effect of, have you heard about what's happening to our neighborhood, or something like that, and a big picture of a big 6-story building, pictured directly from the North Hill local area plan. And then it described something about how 8th Avenue was slotted as a connector road, or a city connector, community connector or something, and that it was being slated for 6-story buildings. So then it referenced me to the City of Calgary website and the North Hill local area plan.
Okay. And you mentioned that you are a semi-frequent advocate or community association volunteer. Are you on the dealing list? Oh,
so I'm not a volunteer with the community association. I live across the street from it, so I used to go to when we used to have in-person meetings back, in the day. I've lived here for 6 years. So before COVID, I would drop into a meeting if I saw a sign that they were holding one. I also went to our community association posted advertisements for the Midfield Park development plan. So I went to some of those workshops. I went to the solar energy workshop where they were proposing all of those. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I appreciate that, Ms. Waldie. What I'm trying to get at is so you live across from the community center there, and they were in the middle of doing this engagement, or rather this North Hill proposal. There was nothing on a sign anywhere that's saying that the community is involved. There was no email sent out to you from the community association. Okay. No. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Ms. Waldie, and thank you very much for coming out and spending 3, 5, 7 days with us here. It's COVID time.
No problem.
I think all of us are still living on Blur's Day and Someday here. All right. Thank you. I think that's it for this panel. Thank you very much, all of you. I will just craft the next and potentially the final panel. Ian Lockerbie, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to be first on the next panel. Jessica Karpat?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Nice to hear your voice, Jessica. How about Jeff Binks?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. And I will simply ask, is there anyone else on the line who would like to speak in this public hearing?
Yes, Your Worship.
Yes.
Okay, I've got a couple. So I heard a male voice. Who is that?
Donald Darnell.
Yes, we had you yesterday, so I'm glad you're here. Okay, Donald Darnell. And I heard another voice.
Yes, Your Worship. Catherine McCunn.
Thank you. I had your name yesterday as well, I think. Is there anyone else? Okay. Well, we'll do this panel of 5, and I'll do one last call at the end of this panel. So we'll go Ian Lockerbie, Jessica Karpat, Jeff Binks, Donald Darnell, and Catherine McCunn. Mr. Lockerbie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, and all the people that are participating in this long process. I hadn't planned on speaking on this item today, but listening to the thoughtful conversations of concerned Calgarians and Council throughout these days really raised awareness of the Guidebook in my mind. I've heard about the dangers of protecting the status quo, and I've heard in not so many words that the rich have been weighing in heavily in this conversation, and we need to be wary of that, and that protecting the character of a neighborhood is really code for protecting the status quo. The world's waking up, and we need to examine the implicit biases that protect the status quo. The Guidebook was started well before a lot of the significant awakening that we've seen last year. and we need to scrutinize it for unintentional biases that, when framed in 2021, clearly don't fit. I'm not claiming to be able to see all of these hidden biases, as I'm trying to wake up myself, but some of the things appear problematic in the guidebook, and I suggest that Council put it on hold until a fresh 2021 look can be had by the guidebook developers and the general public. As an example, we have heritage assets. As Councillor Farkas indicated, the guidebook provides greater protection for heritage assets. These are defined as privately owned structures typically constructed before 1945 that significantly retain original form, scale, massing, door-window pattern, and architectural details or materials. Now, in most of the world, calling something that was built in 1944 a heritage anything would be laughable. Even 1844 would be questionable. The value of protecting these quote-unquote heritage assets is arbitrary, and to me indicates that we still are unintentionally doing things the way we used to. Housing affordability and inclusiveness remain issues, and protecting the status quo in this way is troubling. Ignoring present dire needs in order to honor history is a thing of the past. Just think of the toppling of controversial statues that we saw globally in 2020, and you realize that we now live in the now, and we need to break out of old patterns and not entrench them. Protecting history is now a thing of the past. If increased density is needed, and I believe it is, protecting affluent areas with significant heritage assets does not make sense. It will inevitably lead to more disparity between communities and will pack additional density into less prosperous areas, while leaving space for more fortunate areas. When it does, more low-income people have to be evicted because they're on the scarce land that's not protected. If the idea that protecting the character of a neighborhood is no longer acceptable, then protecting our barely heritage assets needs to be viewed the same way. We need to be consistent in our thinking. As someone who's trying to wake up, I'm sure that I'll be educated by others of more important issues in this document, or more issues in this document as new perspectives are understood and, more importantly, acknowledged. Adopting it now and trying to make piecemeal improvements will not work. To build something important, we need a firm foundation. I would like to propose that we delay the vote on the guidebook for 1 year to allow the pandemic to be over and thoughtful conversations to take place that are framed in the light of greater sensitivity and awareness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Let us go to Jessica Karpat, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. My name is Jessica Karpat, and I am the president of the Mount Pleasant Community Association. So the Mount Pleasant Community Association has participated since 2018 on the North Hill Community Local Area Plan. We have been participating on the Guidebook. There have been several sessions that we have been participating in. I'd like to maybe talk a little bit also as a resident, as I went through the engagement process, both on the Guidebook and the North Hill Community Local Area Plan. I was bombarded by advertisements on Facebook. There was always bold signs in the community when sessions were coming up. I just want to emphasize how well advertised these two documents were in Mount Pleasant, and I'll speak from that Mount Pleasant perspective. It was a very well done process. The Mount Pleasant Community Association is in support of both documents, and I also want to speak to the fact that the Mount Pleasant Community Association was able to work with city staff and influence changes within the document that work for the city and work for our community. So we were able to focus the density within the heart of Mount Pleasant. We were able to work with staff to keep the areas that we would like to have low density or lower or a limited building scale throughout the majority of Mount Pleasant to that 2 to 3 stories in height. And we were really happy with that outcome. So I just want to say that I think that the administration and the planning team at the city has done a wonderful job on both of these documents. And so thank you for listening to me today.
Thanks very much, Ms. Karpat. Let's go to Mr. Binks. Jeff, you have the floor.
Hi there. My name is Jeff Binks. I am not a resident of Elbow Park, but I am the president of the LRT on the Green Foundation. I just wanted to start by thanking all of Council and the city staff and all the members of the public who've sat through the last 3 days hearing these conversations and asking some great questions at the end. I wanted to begin by addressing the point that's been made recently in the media by Councillor Kowel about listening to Calgarians. I think it's important to note that the Guidebook was crafted with input from a significant number of Calgarians through the engagement process. A lot of this engagement occurs on evenings and on weekends and online and helps capture the thoughts and opinions of a large segment of Calgarians who may not have had the luxury of giving up time in the middle of the afternoon on a weekday to speak with Council over the last couple of days. So I agree with Councillor Kowel that Council must be mindful about the opinions of Calgarians, but I also urge you to consider the opinions of all those Calgarians who shaped this document on their evenings, on their weekends, and on...
Sorry, Jeff, hold on. We need everyone again to look at their phone and please hit mute. Remember, you think it's quiet, but it goes big on the speakers in here. All right, Jeff, go ahead. Except now we've lost Jeff. Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Please listen to the Calgarians that shape the document on their evenings, on their weekends, online, and not just those who have taken a weekday time out to address you over the last couple of days. With LRT on the Green, I had the privilege of attending the community charrettes that were done a few years ago as part of the planning process around Green Line communities. What I found interesting about these is that they didn't begin on debating urban form like what we've been seeing here over the last couple of days, but they began by simply asking people what outcome they wanted for the communities. Surprisingly, most people were actually in agreement with the outcomes they wanted. A safe neighborhood, one where their kids could walk to school, one with a coffee shop, maybe a convenience store, and ideally a grocery store they could shop at. Almost everyone agreed that they wanted low taxes to remain in the city of Calgary as well. With everyone in agreement about outcomes, it was pointed out that a large number of Calgary's communities simply don't have the population levels to support the outcomes everyone wants. Schools are in danger of closing, the neighborhood coffee shop closed down recently, and the grocery store is located in a power center a short drive away. If people wanted to see the outcome for their community that they desired, they were going to have to accept some level of change and a population growth in their area. The question of how to shape that change and channel that growth is what was handled very well in the Green Line charrettes, and it's what the Guidebook brings to the city at large. It is the beginning of the conversation, and it's not the end. By approving the Guidebook today, Council is allowing the conversation about how our city grows to begin using a common frame of reference. Without that common frame of reference, the debate and the engagement that people are interested in having about what their community looks like can never truly begin. Kicking the can down the road or voting against adopting the Guidebook is simply delaying a conversation that needs to happen. There are a few outcomes that the Guidebook will predetermine, but one thing is a certainty. Growth and change are coming to our city no matter what. My recollection is that Calgary's population is predicted to grow by 1 million people in the next 30 years. If we don't provide tools for some of those people to be accommodated in our existing communities, they will be driven to our city's edge. As I said, one thing we heard from Calgarians during the Green Line charrette process was they wanted to keep their taxes low. I believe meeting the goals of Planet Calgary through the Municipal Development Plan was predicted to save taxpayers $11 billion. This morning, I saw on social media that figure has actually been updated to almost $17 billion in capital costs and $260 million in annual operating costs. No amount of public art freezes, canceled bike lanes, wage cuts, or staff reductions can come close to making up that amount of money to the City of Calgary. So I close by asking this of Council. I hope that you support and approve the Guidebook today. But if you don't, I ask you to have the courage to say to Calgarians that you will fight to preserve the status quo of their neighborhoods and prevent the growth from touching them, but that it's going to have to come at a cost, and so you'll be raising their taxes and their neighbors' taxes to do it. So as councillors, if at the end of the day you're comfortable with the outcome of that open and honest conversation with Calgarians about density at the edge and the increased taxes to pay for it, then go ahead and vote against the Guidebook. But if you're not, I ask that you approve the Guidebook so we all have a common frame of reference to discuss how the city will grow over the next 30 years, how we can keep taxes low, and also how we can achieve the outcomes Calgarians have said they wanted for their communities. We should be talking about what people want from their life in Calgary and how we shape and structure the growth that is coming to our city. Unfortunately, it seems we're bogged down and focused on, at the moment, is just the shape and size of buildings that are going to show up in a neighborhood. This conversation of growth is a conversation the citizens of Calgary quite literally can't afford to wait any longer to have, and the Guidebook is a critical tool in making sure that conversation is had properly. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Binks, and thanks for your endless advocacy in our community as well. Let's go to Mr. Darnell. Are you there?
Yes, Your Worship.
You have the floor, sir. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Nenshi and councillors. I'm grateful for your service and your patience through this process, and I'm also very grateful for the quality of dialogue brought forward by citizens that have shown up certainly this morning. My name's Donald Darnell. I am speaking just as a citizen on the south side of Calgary, Ward 11, Haysboro. I want to add my voice to those in support of the Guidebook for Great Communities. I believe this document reflects valuable insights from members of Calgary's neighborhoods and from talented and knowledgeable engineers and designers in city administration. It also obviously draws on lessons learned in cities across North America and around the world on how to improve health, safety, happiness, and sustainability for their citizens. Listening in last night, some folks have brought up concerns that this guidebook is being rushed through too quickly without enough public consultation, and in my view, the opposite is true. I'm impressed by the process, directly engaging literally thousands of our citizens. This guidebook reflects many adaptations to address citizen inputs. It's been worked on, in my opinion, long and hard enough. We've also heard concerns about inadequate infrastructure. This fails to recognize, I think, two important realities. First, aging infrastructure eventually needs renovation, and this presents opportunities for upgrades in our established neighborhoods. Second, the older communities in our city have been, the older communities in our city have been declining in population. In most cases, the infrastructure was built for a larger population that is currently living there. That's certainly true here where I live in West Haysboro. A lesson repeatedly demonstrated in city expansion is that in the long run, we are much better off upgrading and renovating existing infrastructure to support gradually increasing density than to invest in new pipes and wires and schools in new outer suburban developments. We should not lose sight of the facts. The way we are growing now, building more and wider roads and water and sewage systems to more and larger sprawling suburbs, costs money. The per capita cost, as Mr. Binks mentioned, expands as the city sprawls outward. That means in the long term, higher taxes per household and still less funding for our schools and parks. The Guidebook for Great Communities allows for subtle and gradual changes that will ultimately apply our tax dollars more efficiently. We get a better city at a lower cost. Now, I've heard some people nervous about the wrong people moving next door, and I've heard this phrase, the way of life being destroyed by allowing some flexibility in housing. Again, I believe the opposite is true. Communities built in the 50s and 60s, like the one where I live, have been declining in population. This means declining tax base per neighborhood, fewer resources to support amenities. Enrollment in the neighborhood schools declines. That's true here, and eventually this threatens closure. There's nothing like increasing density to justify keeping, improving, and expanding in the neighborhood school. Similarly, providing some safe spaces for folks to choose to walk or bike or take transit is not a move to ban car ownership. It makes the roadway less crowded, less costly to maintain, and a little safer and quieter for everyone. Encouraging a diverse range of transportation is really the only way to avoid unbearable congestion. Finally, I want to mention I've worked with numerous technology firms in my career, emerging and established corporations, many of these providing high-paying professional jobs. The best of these companies have a lot of options regarding where to set up shop and where their employees will make their homes. The Guidebook can help make Calgary, in my opinion, a healthier and more attractive city with vibrant neighborhoods, livable neighborhoods, the kind of place that competes with other cities for that new business. The hard work of volunteers across our city and talented city staff have delivered us a great guidebook. I have my pet amendment ideas like everyone. I would hope to see more support for district energy development. I think more action is definitely needed to create distributed affordable housing across the city. Maybe some protections for solar access. But at this point, for the future of our communities and our city, I urge you to implement the guidebook without amendment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darnell. And we'll go to Catherine McCunn. Are you there, Ms. McCunn?
I'm here.
All right, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Catherine McCunn, and I'm a resident of the Mayfair Bel Air community. I'm here to speak in favor of a request to have the guidebook and suggested amendments referred back to PUD for administration to host a better public awareness campaign and to host direct consultations with the public through a citizens task force and return a better guidebook for Calgary to City Council before July 2021. Over the past couple of days, we have heard a lot of good arguments for the guidebook, but improvements must be made to be beneficial to all Calgarians. Calgary wants confidence that the future Calgary preserves and protects those things they cherish the most, as well as a future of affordability and sustainability for everyone. We want a win-win guidebook and are trusting City Council to deliver this. A public awareness campaign will ensure all Calgarians know how the guidebook will affect them going forward. The task force, comprised of community representatives, developers, and city planners, would be entrusted with the responsibility of finding the right balance. All groups must be balanced, objective, and transparent. I urge you to do the right thing in the right way. Calgarians need this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCunn. That brings us to the end of our panel, but stick around, folks. There are some questions, and in fact, I have a question. Go ahead, Councillor Farkas.
Thank you, Worship. For Mr. Binks, I'm not sure if I caught that, but did you say that the guidebook was positioned to save us $17 billion? And if so, how and over what type of time frame?
Councillor Farkas, sorry, I was talking about back in the Planet Calgary days, achieving that goal of growth within existing communities was said to save $11 billion. And I saw a post on social media that the City of Calgary, and apologies, I don't know which City of Calgary document that was pulled from, but it's recently updated to say that meeting that growth within the existing city over the next several decades will save $17 billion in capital costs, $260 million in annual operating costs. And the point being that, no, the guidebook in itself will not create that savings of $17 billion or $260 million in annual operating costs. However, the guidebook is the key to having that conversation. It sets that common frame of reference to allow us to have that discussion, to drive some of the 1 million people in population growth coming to the city over the next 30 years into existing communities, to do it in a sensitive way, in a strategic way. And so essentially without that guidebook, we can't start to have a conversation citywide. And without that conversation, we essentially default into the sprawl, and that's what leads to that $11 billion in costs, which was in the Planet Calgary discussion, which has apparently grown now that other figures have been revised into $17 billion.
Okay, thank you, and I would certainly appreciate you sending us the costing out of those numbers. Anyway, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks. And by the way, Councillor Farkas, I can answer that question, which is, those are the numbers that came when we approved the changes to the municipal development plan some months ago, just a few months ago. That was definitely part of that report, and those are city numbers. Ms. McCunn, I have a question for you. You said something that pegged me, which I hadn't really heard explicitly before, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You suggested that you are saying we should go back, look at these amendments, and bring back amendments to council by July of this year. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
So do you believe?
Or whenever.
No, and we're in a public hearing, so I have no opinion yet. But I think that's an interesting point of view to have. Do you believe that, given the public engagement we've had over the last couple of days, given my big piece of paper here that I've written potential amendments on, that that's enough time for us to be able to address some of the major concerns that we've heard?
I don't know, but I think I just put that out there, but I think we need to take the time to make sure we get it right.
Yeah.
If we could do it by July, that'd be great. Should I put maybe July 2022? I'm not sure.
I have an opinion on the matter, which is I feel like we could. I feel like the things I've heard are complicated and important, but we can do them. And I'd be really interested in a short period of getting this to a better place, if that's something that folks think is possible. So anyway, sorry, I'm speechifying the thing I always tell council not to do, but I appreciate your point of view on that. Thank you. Let's go to Councillor Farrell.
Thank you. A couple of things. To Councillor Farkas, it was in the report around the MDP analysis and update. Achieving the MDP and Calgary Transportation Plan goals results in a savings of $16.8 billion in capital costs over 60 years, annual operating cost savings of $260 million by 2070. But my question is for Ms. Karpat.
Hi, Councillor Farrell.
Hi, thank you for all your work on this. I know that there's questions about, we heard somebody from Renfrew talking about how she hadn't heard about this. I know that there was a bold sign at the Renfrew Community Association for 2 years. But what other forms of engagement? I know my office sent out multiple newsletters, requests for input, news nuggets, and I'm just wondering what other engagement. I know that there was a direct mail twice into everybody's mailboxes as well. That doesn't mean people are going to pay attention. Okay, I'm just wondering if you could list some of the others that you can think of off the top of your head.
Oh, yeah. So I would say the Mount Pleasant Community Association relayed all of that information onto their Facebook page. We sent out newsletters and mail-outs. There were updates within the message from the board within our own community. We received 2 direct mail-outs. There were bold signs not only on by our community association, but it was on 4th Street and 10th Street, as well as the North Hill VCA Vet Clinic. Gosh, there were so many. Like I said, there was, anybody who had a Facebook page, I had so many opportunities to get involved just even as a resident. I was constantly seeing like the virtual open houses, the open houses before COVID. There was a lot of opportunities to get involved. I know our planning committee felt that at every point they were kept in the loop, that there was a ton of communication from city staff on both the guidebook and the LAP. There were 10 in-person sessions. There were another 10 virtual stakeholder sessions with them. There were 3 virtual engagement events. What else can I remember?
There was a big fair at James Fowler School as well. I remember that was actually one of the best public engagements I think I've been to. It was remarkable.
That was at the kickoff. That was.
Yeah. All right. I think that identifies that there was significant engagement. If you're not interested in it's hard. There's so much being thrown at people to pay attention to all of these things. All right. Thank you. Thanks for all your volunteering on this project. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for this. I'm going to ask now if there is anyone else on the line who would like to speak on this item. Anyone else?
Yes. Hi, Mayor Nenshi.
Hi, who's that?
It's Chris Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. I'm going to put you next on my list. Is there anyone else?
And just as a heads up, I do have a presentation.
Okay, I'll get the clerk to pony that up now. Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? All right. Mr. Stanley, your presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, hello.
Oh, sorry. I've been having problems with my phone, but yes, I am also registered to speak.
And what is your name?
My name is Melanie Swailes.
Melanie Swailes. Thanks very much, Ms. Swailes. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll put you second on this list. Is there anyone else? All right. We're going to go to Mr. Stanley and Ms. Swailes, and then I will ask one more time if there's anyone else before closing this public hearing. So if you are within the sound of my voice and you did not pre-register but you want to be part of the public hearing, send an email to councilclerk@calgary.ca right away. All right, Mr. Stanley, your presentation is up, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Nenshi. Good afternoon, Mayor Nenshi and councillors. I'm Chris Stanley, actually a Calgary resident, and I thank you for allowing me to speak about will the Guidebook support us as we move ahead. In attempting to put some light on the subject, I would like us to consider where we find ourselves in this moment. Maybe we will learn something. To help, let us reflect on the triple.
Hold on, Mr. Stanley. Someone's listening to the webcast, and it's coming through on the phone line. Everyone hit mute. Yeah, there we go. Go ahead. Mr. Stanley, back to you.
Hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Perfect. So to help, let us reflect on the triple bottom line: environment, economic, and social. These are considered as three key ingredients to develop our future. Environment, I will leave to the professionals. Economic and growth appears to be the city's focus, so I'm going to sit with you in the social. Over the last 2 days, an aspect of social has appeared before us in two arenas: engagement and cultural diversity. Whenever we step into a conversation with either of these, there is intention, declared or otherwise. So where are we from what is possible? Next slide, please. Let's take a look at recommendations for industrial growth strategy from 2 days ago. Citywide growth strategy, encourage intensification on established industrial sites. This was just a recommendation from a consultant. The recommendation read, the city should consider reduced or waived development, related fees, expedited plan and approvals, or other initiatives to spur intensification within established industrial areas. This would lessen the need for new greenfield development, take advantage of existing services, provide employment in proximity to labour, and contribute to sustainable growth management. The belief appears to be, if you build it today, people will come. What supports this? How valid are the assumptions and targets we have? In the meantime, what is the social impact to communities? Being left on hold, not knowing, waiting? Will this apply to established community development? We're all doing our best. I'm just asking. Appearing a little more important to date, there appears to be a gap in the social impact conversation. However, next slide, please. The element of social impact has been considered. Historic East Village, ARP, a triple bottom line cost-benefit analysis of the environmental, social, and economic impacts of inundation and mitigation should be considered to inform the optimal protection level and design of any flood mitigation measures. And also, in January's combined council meeting, it was suggested that council involve citizens to create understanding about social impacts of proposed mining in the foothills. I see the consideration of social impact being necessary because it serves a purpose. It creates some wisdom for us. Let's step into another conversation. Next slide, please. When developing established areas, why isn't the social impact on community being discussed? Risks and opportunities. There are social, business, and health consequences. The capacity of communities has proven to be perfectly capable to respond to the place they find themselves. Remember the 2013 flood? They will continue to do so in the future, so don't be surprised. Having the courage to relinquish some of our control to become curious, accepting, and vulnerable in the place we stand today just might enable us to, as a community of cultural diversity, step into a place of understanding and opportunity. Next slide, please. Appreciation that both the Guidebook and MDP make reference to Imagine Calgary, and believing that today the ingredients of resilience and sustainability reside in the people of Calgary, I'm going to step away from the vision of economic growth for a moment. And to quote Imagine Calgary's vision from 2007, for thousands of years, people have met at the confluence of two vital rivers to imagine and realize their futures. Today we have built a city of energy born of a powerful convergence of people, ideas, and place. Together we continue to imagine Calgary, making a community in which we are each connected to one another, our diverse skills and heritage interweave to create a resilient communal fabric, while our collective spirit generates opportunity, prosperity, and choice for all. And it does continue. We are each connected to our places. We treasure and protect our natural environment. Magnificent mountain vistas and boundless prairie skies inspire each of us to build spaces worthy of our surroundings. We are each connected to our communities, whether social, cultural, or physical. These communities are mixed, safe, and just. They welcome meaningful participation from anyone, and people move freely between them. We are each connected to beyond our boundaries. We understand our impacts upon responsibilities to others. Our talent and caring, combined with a truly Canadian sense of citizenship, make positive changes across Alberta, through Canada, and around the world. We can make it happen.
Now, sir, you are at time. I do love hearing you. I do love hearing you read that, because it gives me pride of authorship, because I'm the one who wrote it back in the day in 2005. But I do ask you to wrap up in one sentence, please.
I can do that easy. Thank you very much, Nanenshi. Will the Guidebook support us as we move ahead? Like all conversations, I believe that it all depends on the authenticity of our invitation as we step forward. Thank you very much for listening and your time.
Thanks very much. Let's go to Ms. Swailes, please.
Hi, is this working now?
Yes, you sound great. Go ahead.
Perfect. Your Worship and City Councillors, my name is Melanie Swailes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Calgary is a city of 1.5 million, but it's really a collection of communities. Ask a Calgarian where they live, and they'll say Ranchlands or Scarborough or Lakeview, not 25th Street or Bellevue Towers. It's the community level that matters most. The Guidebook got that part right with the Maria and David journey. We experience our city from the ground level. But what the Guidebook missed was how unique each community is. You've heard 2 days' worth of passionate speakers wanting to keep their communities great. They don't see tools fine enough to do that in the current Guidebook, like trying to cut hair with grass clippers. Possible, but far from ideal. We need better tools, finer granulated ones. 2 days' worth of speakers, but I don't think there's been one from the newest Calgary communities, the same ones that are causing the fuss in the first place. One speaker put it best. After letting us invest money in the inner suburbs, it's too late to change the rules on us. We didn't create sprawl. In fact, we helped avoid it by choosing to live near downtown instead of in the far suburbs. Ironically, the more the new communities grow, the more the established communities are supposed to change. Even more ironically, the new communities have what the established communities want: certainty. If you buy a home in a new community such as Mahogany or Seton, the developer will ask you what kind you want: single family, estate, duplex, townhouse. If you say you want an estate home, the developer ensures that there are similar homes next to you based on the build form. There will not be a 6-story building next to you because it would overshadow your house. In new communities, that is called smart business, giving the customer what they want. In established communities, it gets called NIMBYism. City planning has assured us that we can sort this all out at the LAP stage. Yet we heard from Inglewood, Bridgeland, Crescent Heights, incredibly involved CAs with incredibly well-informed residents, that they've tested out these LAPs and they've come away thinking that their best option might be to withdraw from the process. They are only being handed out garden shears, and they're afraid of butchering their communities in the process. CAs are the backbones of our communities. They're volunteering their energies to make significant contributions to the health and well-being of their communities. The strains and stresses of trying to fight for their communities was highly evident yesterday. CA reps have put in hundreds, if not thousands, of hours into researching and trying to bring forward amendments. They would not be doing this if they thought the guidebook would be beneficial to their community. I do sympathize with planners struggling to create a document that will please everyone, because frankly, that is impossible. Anyone who's ever tried to order pizza with a group knows this. But at the same time, many CAs have been working with planners over the course of a year, asking for changes that have never made it to the pages of the draft version. The thing is that the guidebook is only step one. It's really at the LAP stage that communities get really involved, and to do that, there needs to be trust in the process. Some of that trust has been harmed by the process to date, and residents came out in droves to speak at the public hearing. Please listen to what they have said. The vast majority of those presenting to Council actually conditionally supported parts of the guidebook. Some CAs welcomed a guidebook to help with ad hoc developments they were already experiencing. But the majority of others felt that their unique concerns were not being heard. Many felt their residents would be blindsided when they saw the full impact of what a connector street could mean. One speaker said that some Renfrew residents thought the North Hill plan referred to the area around Sears. One speaker said that a direct mail-out should have been sent to each and every household, clearly showing the proposed changes. Many commented on the name Guidebook instead of a statutory document. Perhaps a new name for the final version would go a long way in setting things right. Communities want to start with all of the building blocks on the table, not only the yellow and the red ones. We respectfully ask administration to rework parts of the guidebook. If the guidebook was more amenable to more residents, the LAP processes would start off on such a better footing. Right now, that's difficult to imagine. Communities want to lead the process, not be limited right from the start. This should not just be the top-down vision of city planners, but the vision of each community. Please refer the guidebook back to administration for consultation and active discussion with communities on the proposed amendments to address the concerns that you have heard. Certainly around the definition of low-density residential appropriate scale modifications, also on scale for collector streets or lot coverage when replacing an RC1 with a townhouse. There's still some work to be done, and we hope you will take the time to do so with very active citizens who have presented their cases over the past few days. I'll end with the words of Jane Jacobs. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you as well for your service to the community. Councillor Sutherland, do you have a question?
Yes. Very interesting conversation. I like the comparison between Seaton and Ms. Swailes. You live in Brentwood?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I'm just looking actually at the tax assessments, and I'm seeing, and I'm just talking about averages. So, for example, Seaton has 2,626 residents, and so the average is $3,008 per residence. And Brentwood has 3,427, but your average is actually 3,205 per residence. So when you're talking about taxation per building, it's actually a higher average in Brentwood than that selection. So what do you suggest is for an inner city community where you're right, Seaton has all those mixes and availabilities, including, mixed use in terms of retail and that. What do you think the right approach is for more mature communities like yours in order to create that sense of community and that mixed use over, it's going to take a long period of time, but over time?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, we encourage redevelopment when it's sensitive to existing residents and in scale with existing houses. One of the things that Brentwood has added a lot of density in is secondary suites, but they don't count towards density. So over the last, since late 2017, we've added over 90 secondary suites, which is really the equivalent of turning 90 R1 homes into R2 homes. So that's one thing that's density that really isn't being seen but is happening. But the bigger thing is we support densification when it makes sense and doesn't negatively impact those around. We've just had for North Hill Mall, we've just had a big application for almost 300 units, residential units to be added there, and we've been fully supportive. We've been working with the developer and the mall management, and it makes a lot of sense to place it there. But we've also seen development in other communities like Banff Trail, where you have a townhouse that goes into next to a bungalow, and it completely overshadows or shades the backyard. So there's certainly we welcome a lot of density or densification in certain areas because we know our community is aging, but we just want it to be done well.
So when you're looking at this, how do you determine, like, if you're not a specialist and you're so involved, which I appreciate it, how do you separate really what a local area plan, LEP, does compared to what this guidebook does?
Sorry, I'm not understanding quite. The guidebook is setting the framework, but at the local area plan, we are determining specific streets and specific locations. I'm not sure if that's answering that.
Okay. So, well, I guess, do you agree that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you agree that in terms of a guidebook, if it's done properly, it assists in the details of the local area plan where you determine the density and where it should be?
Yes, with the condition that some of the tools I feel need further fine-tuning. So, for example, you have the low scale for intensity, and then you have a mid-scale, and you go from being, 6 stories to 12 stories, or 3 stories to 6 stories, and that's quite a range. So we don't see a tool that's specific to our community. So we have, for example, a lot of bungalow houses, so even a 3-story next to a bungalow is really quite large. So we feel it has to be really fine-tuned so it fits with the community. And the connector streets is another area where we really see a big potential problem. Our community is surrounded by some pretty major streets. We have Shaganappy, Crowchild, John Laurie. They're all really, really major streets around us, but they don't have any housing directly on them. So the only connectors that we have through our community is like Northmount Drive, Brisbois Drive, and they're sleepy little tree-lined streets, essentially. But if we need to pick connectors, those are the ones that are going to likely be selected as connectors. And yet we can't see how 6-story buildings or higher are going to fit appropriately on those streets. So we just want some finer tools. We want some, instead of going from, a bungalow to a 3-story, a 3-story to a 6, a 6 to a 12, we want to be able to have some build forms that are sort of in between there.
Okay, so we're jotting down, obviously, what's being said. So I want to make it very clear so we understand each other. Because this is good notes, is what you're asking for is you're saying that the current scaling in the guidebook of low, medium, etc., the variance within that scale is just too large, that you would prefer to have more levels of scale.
Yes.
Rather than such a large variance in the current ones.
Yes, and I would point out, like, the scales allow for variation. So, for example, you go from a 6-story to a 12-story. That doesn't necessarily mean you can only build a 6 or only build a 12. I mean, you can build a 7 if you'd like, but you can build up to 12. And so if a developer has a choice to build between a 6 and a 12, it's like me saying, would you rather have $6 or $12? Well, I'd rather have the 12, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So tightening the variances at different levels would help bring some confidence in what can go to a particular lot or whatever.
Yes, giving us more things to choose from, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mayor Nenshi.
Thanks very much. That was a very, very helpful exchange we just had there. Thanks for that. Let's go to Councillor Karpat, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also found it a helpful exchange. I wanted to ask a couple more follow-up questions of Ms. Swailes. Ms. Swailes, is there anywhere in your neighborhood right now where where people are not allowed by right to build lower than 3 stories?
Sorry, what is the question? Is there any place where you're not allowed to build lower than 3 stories?
Yeah, you mentioned that you've got sleepy 1-story bungalows, and the first increment of height is 3 stories. And I've asked you, is there any place today where someone would not be allowed to build 3 stories by right in your community?
They would have to apply for a land use rezoning. They could go up to a 10-meter height, and that would be difficult to get 3 stories out of 10 meters, like on an RC1 lot. Otherwise, they would have to apply for a change of land use.
We see 3-story buildings all the time. And the point is, it's 3 stories is allowed by right everywhere in the city, including Brentwood. There's no place where you're restricted below 3 stories.
Councillor.
Is that correct?
Councillor, the point is to ask a question to get an answer. The point is not to make the person look bad.
So I guess the next question is...
So I think the point, and you actually did answer it, Ms. Swailes, that in an RC1 and RC2 area, there's a 10-meter allowance by right. So those bungalows could become 2.5, or if you squeeze them, 3 stories without going through a land use change today. I think that was the councillor's point.
People are building 3 stories in RC1 and RC2 with a 10-meter height limit across the city today by right, is my point.
But this is time to ask questions to people, Councillor Karpat.
So, I guess the question is are you suggesting that you need a 4-story or a 5-story or a 6-story as opposed to up to 6 stories in specific areas?
No, I'm suggesting that you need a lower building form that's contextual to the neighborhood. The key thing is, if it's contextual, it can go up to 8.6 meters. If it's otherwise, yes, they can go higher, but it would also have a chance, it would be a discretionary permit. People could also comment on it, and they could also make the comment that it's not fitting in with the neighborhood, or that it has to be changed the build form to make it more sensitive to the area.
Okay, so you're asking for a clawback on existing entitlements. You would like the city to tell people that what you are legally allowed to do with your land right now is more than we are going to allow in the future.
I feel like this is, may I use the word badgering? I think I've answered the question, and I don't feel that this is helpful. So if there's other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Ms. Swailes.
Then I will stop badgering you. I apologize for doing so. I just wanted to be very clear that you were talking about not only increments of 1 story being allowed by right, but actual clawback on the existing. Thank you.
Councillor Kowel, we got it. Thanks, Ms. Swailes, and thank you for answering that question. Let's go to Councillor Farkas, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you, Melanie, for being here as well. My question is for you. So you've probably been plugged into what the experience has been for some of the other planning committees in North Hill. And the community associations are often being told that they can have their concerns addressed at the local area plan stage, and that the guidebook is simply just a recipe for baking a cake. I was wondering if you could kind of respond to that statement and let me know if your concerns are actually addressed through that, or what are you hearing in terms of your conversations with some of the others that you're coordinating with?
Well, I think the best analogy somebody made yesterday was, yes, we're being given the ingredients for a cake, but if the ingredients are only vanilla, it's going to be hard to make a chocolate cake. So we're just seeing that there's limited things that we have to work with. And it's not just the overall height, like a 3-story building. It's the building form, the townhouses. So, for example, when you have bungalows that are all sitting in a row, and we have good examples of that in Banff Trail outside of my community, and then you take the end lot and you put a townhouse on that lot, the townhouse turns sideways, and you have 4 units that are overlooking what was once a private backyard from the second house in. And I feel that that hasn't been accurately addressed. In one of the North Hill community open houses that I attended, there was a city planner there that I thought had actually a really good point. He said, we're recognizing that the RCGs, or the RGs, can be very disruptive to the existing RC1 homes because they turn on the property and they face, a different orientation really than the second house. And he said a better option seems to be if the developer buys the first lot and the second lot and then has sort of an L-shaped building so that the second lot may have a duplex or even a triplex on it, but it's still oriented the same way as the next house down. So you don't have this thing with the four houses overlooking into the backyard. So that's one of the examples. The other one is the connector street seems to be really a concern from what I've heard with the North Hill plan. You have to select certain streets that are the connectors. And in our community, the connectors are pretty quiet streets because we have these really major streets going outside of us. We don't have like a 16th Avenue running through the middle of our community. We have all these major streets on the outside. So it becomes difficult to say where are you going to put the homes that are going to be the build forms that are appropriate for the connectors. So we just haven't seen, looking at the North Hill plan, we didn't see that there was fine enough granulation that it would be what we think our residents would be happy with.
Yeah, fair enough. And I appreciated your menu analogy. Like, you can pick anything on the menu, but what if you're a vegetarian being forced to a steakhouse, right? You can still choose among the options. But
yeah.
Caesar salad, no bacon.
Well, I would ask... next for you, Melanie, do you think this new generation of local area plans is going to allow, or do you think it's going to allow for the granularity that you and others are looking for?
I think it could. I think it involves some finer granulations. I know that's something a lot of communities have been asking for quite a while. We want some different build forms than what we're seeing right now. I still go back to one of the best comments that I heard that has really stayed with me is when the guidebook was first put out about a year and a half ago, or the first version that we saw, I think in late 2019, somebody said, I don't see my community reflected here. And yesterday we heard 2 days' worth of speakers saying what they loved about their communities, why they were so passionate about their communities. And yet, if they're not reflected in the current guidebook, then that's a pretty major change. We definitely know we want to have some densification. We want to have some remodernization even in our community. But it needs to be done thoughtfully and sensitively. It doesn't have to happen all at once.
And do you think it's a mistake for the city to be going down this road instead of, say, as Brentwood did with the station ARP, as focusing on the areas of change and stability?
Actually, I'm surprised you know about that one. Yeah, so the Brentwood has a station ARP, and it applied only to the area that was about a 600-meter radius around the LRT stop itself, or at the LRT station there. And so the idea behind the guidebook, which was done in 2009, I believe, not around the guidebook, around the ARP done in 2009, was that there would be two identified areas, the areas of stability and the areas of change. And the idea was that the redevelopment would occur in the area around the TOD, and that makes sense. We want to focus it there. It's walkable. It's more, we want to, get people out of their cars. So that was where the intensity was going to happen. That was where the redevelopment was going to happen. And then the document references the areas of stability as well, and that's all the existing neighborhood areas. And they said those areas will undergo very minimal change. Houses will be replaced here and there, that kind of thing, but they'll be replaced like for like because the change is going to happen in these major areas. And since then, we've really added another major area, and that would be the Northland Mall area, where substantial renovation and redevelopment can undergo there, and we welcome it. But it can do so without having too many negative impacts on the built form of the remainder of the community.
Great. I really appreciate your engagement today. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Farkas. Let's go to Councillor Chu, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Swailes, for speaking today. I know you were busy yesterday, and I just want to say that I always respect you, and not necessarily that every time I agree with what you said, but I always respect you, and because you and the Brentwood Community Association has been doing the best we can for the community and with lots of common sense. Like you said, inviting higher density around the LRT TODs. And it's a question I asked another member yesterday, Michael from Brentwood. I will ask you the same thing, and you mentioned already, but I would just want a little bit more of what your thoughts were. Basically, is the green field that when you go to a new developed area, you know what you get into. And then in the developed area, like Brentwood, you have no idea what's going on. And in the future, if someone, like the guidebook says you can build anywhere in our one area that can go up to 3 or 4 units per lot, including, on top of that, including secondary suite. Can you elaborate that a little bit for me?
So, I mean, the comparison, I guess, would be right now the lowest scale category that you have in the guidebook is the urban form or the urban form category and the scale category, and that would allow for up to a townhouse to be built on what is currently an RC1 house. And yes, it would still need a land use redesignation to RCG or an RG. Sorry. The difference I think that we're seeing is if I go to a new area, and I love going to show homes. So you go to a new area, and most of the lots are already zoned RG, and RG allows for a variety of building forms without having to do a land use change. So they already allow for townhouses, they already allow for single houses. So let's say I go to a new community, and I go to the builder, the developer, and I say, I want to buy a lot. And he goes, okay, which one? I want this one right here. Perfect. What are you going to build? Well, it depends on which area of the city he's going to ask me, what do you want? Do you want a single-family house or do you want a townhouse? And if I say, well, it shouldn't matter because it's already RG, he's going to say, but wait, this is our estate home section, or this is our single home section, this is our duplex section. We wouldn't be able to sell other properties if anything could go willy-nilly on the one next door. So if I'm buying a single-family house in a new neighborhood, I want other single-family houses next to me because I don't want to be overshadowed by a townhouse or by another taller form of a building. And so that's what they do in the new communities. And yet when they delineate, even though they have the chance to go with all these various forms, in a new community, when you look at their maps, they clearly separate single-family, double-family, estate homes, laned homes, and they put the similar building forms together because they recognize that putting a townhouse next to a single family, it would be significant change, and that's not what people are looking for. And that's what I heard from people in the hearings for the last couple of days is that, we like a single-family house. We like an R2 house. There's lots of communities that have R2 homes, and they're looking at the same thing. They want to protect some pockets of R2 homes, not just have all the building forms in the same area. I hope that sort of answered that.
Great. Thank you very much. That'll be all. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Chu.
Thank you very much. And I will now do a last call for anyone else who wants to speak on this item. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item?
It's Greg Miller. I'm here for the North Hill Communities Local Area Plan, so I'm maybe a little out of step with your order here.
You are indeed out of step, Mr. Miller. This is the final call for the guidebook. As soon as we finish this, I will close this public hearing and open the public hearing on North Hill.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Going once?
Hi, Your Worship. I'm here for the guidebook.
No, yes, your name is?
Ostap Fedynets.
Oh my gosh, you'll have to say that again and probably spell it for me. Slowly, please.
O-S-E-A-P.
Okay.
F-E-D-Y-N-E-T-S.
Well, Ostap, please, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So thank you to Your Worship and Council for this opportunity. My name is Ostap Fedynets. I actually wasn't going to weigh in, but changed my mind at the last minute and scribbled a few things together over my lunch break. I haven't listened to all of the speakers before me, but I bet I'm in a pretty rare group. Not only do I not live in Elbow Park, I don't actually currently live in Calgary. but because I want to move there soon, I support the Guidebook. I'm currently working as a planner in a rural community, and my partner, who's also from Calgary, is a physical therapist at a local hospital here. We finished our master's degrees in Calgary in 2019 and left Calgary temporarily to find work. Our families live in Mount Pleasant and Spruce Cliff. We love the inner city neighborhoods and hope to live in one when we return this fall. Currently, the type of housing that meets our needs in these locations is limited in supply. We can either purchase a much older home and pay for much more space than we need, or we can rent for as long as it takes a $1 million duplex to become affordable. Fortunately, an RCG row house may allow us to trade the square footage that we don't need for the location that we want to live in. That's what I believe the Guidebook does better. It allows for the creation of more housing options that lets people make their own trade-offs between the square footage they can pay for and their commute time. I'm asking Council to look at these neighborhoods for what they are. They're places of opportunity. We have to look at why land close to downtown is more expensive. It's because it has access to more and better jobs, which are reachable within shorter commutes by either bike, car, train, or bus. If we make it difficult to build anything other than a single detached home in these areas, then through the prices of those homes, we're actively excluding the people that can benefit the most from living there. Density is how people with lower incomes can compete with higher incomes for the right to live in the most opportune neighborhoods. Single-family zoning is being abolished in cities all around North America. It violates individuals' property rights, it heavily distorts the free housing market, and it damages the economy by not allowing people to live where they would get the best jobs and earn the most money. It's got to go. Thanks so much for your time and consideration. That's all I have today.
Thanks very much, sir. Thank you for being here. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing on this matter now. Madam Clerk, did we figure out if that's the longest public hearing that we've had in the last 10 years?
Oh, yes, for the last 10 years, perhaps. Yes, we're still confirming.
I asked Madam Clerk late last night if she would go back and see how many people we had speak at the stadium shopping center redesignation in 2013. It's the only one I think would come close. And if you're wondering, almost double secondary suites.
Yes,
so
secondary suites was 75. That I can confirm.
So with that, folks, I'm going to table, table is the right word, table this item to after the next public hearing.